Well, thank you guys so much for having us. We've watched a lot of these over the years, so it's really special to be here, and hopefully this is useful to somebody. Today we're going to be talking about how we maximize speed and minimize button presses as a small commercial studio. Oh, you also have a clicker.
I have a clicker.
Okay. So we are three of the members of Frame 48. I'm Tom, founder and executive creative director.
I'm Enrique.
Oh, hi, I'm Kyle.
So Frame 48 is a boutique motion design lab here in Los Angeles. We have 14 people full-time. We're a little over 8 years old, and 8 of those 14 people are CG artists working in Houdini. We mostly do premium 3D motion work for brands and agencies, helping them show their products in ways that would be impossible to capture in camera. So to kick things off, we're going to play our studio reel so you can see a bit more the type of stuff we do. So those were little guy and big guy. We use them to test things in Houdini. 2 years ago, we made the jump to Houdini, and we kind of did it in the middle of production in like a month, which in hindsight was a bit crazy. Don't know if I recommend that approach, but we made the jump for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, probably preaching to the choir, but nodes and proceduralism just make a lot of sense, and frankly, it's a lot of fun to work that way. And Houdini really revitalized the way that we think about our work and the way we think about the art behind the art, such as building tools and how we support each other as artists versus just like getting a shot done and moving on. And thinking about things in terms of points in space with attributes is just a lot of fun. And if you're not convinced, here's 240 more pages of reasons in the 20.5 changelogs compared to everybody else. It truly does make a difference when you're using software that the devs care about, and it makes you feel supported. So now we do everything in Houdini from layout to lighting. The primary focus of our talk today is in regards to the CG pipeline, or how you get from this to this to this. And whether you're 2 people or a massive studio, the pipeline really serves the same purpose. It's how can we minimize pain and suffering for everyone while building a scaffolding for the projects to kind of live within. So our presentation is broken into 3 main parts. First and foremost, kind of the essential elements of our pipeline and what those are, how we adopted USD as a small team, and then a little bit of a POV collaborating on a shot across multiple departments.
So hi everyone, hello again. My name is Kyle. I'm the CG artist at Frame 48, and I have been with the studio for close to a year now. During my time at the studio, I've been creating tools to help with the pipeline, and then I'll hand off to Enrique.
Hello, everyone. I've been at Frame48 for around 5 years now. And ever since I joined the team, I've been in charge of building and maintaining our pipeline with really one goal in mind, which is to try to make our artists' lives a little bit easier. And luckily now I share the privilege with Kyle. Before we start, just a little disclaimer. Everything that we're about to talk about is our way of doing things. We're not claiming that this is the correct way of doing things. However, this is what works for us right now. So just keep that in mind. So with that out of the way, let's just jump right into it. At Frame48, over the years, we've gone through so many iterations of our pipeline. I mean, I remember when I joined the team, artists used to use whatever software they felt the most comfortable in. That on itself was a little messy. I don't want to go back to that.
Shout out 3ds Max.
Luckily now we use Houdini as our main DCC, and this is more or less what our pipeline looks like. Bunch of colorful custom HDAs and Python tools. But honestly, all these things aside, across the year, there's always been a couple of things that have stayed consistent. And I do believe that these three things that we're about to talk about are kind of like the key main elements if you want to build a pipeline to collaborate with a team. So number one, we need to track our work. At the studio, we do commercials that range anywhere from a single shot all the way to 50 plus shots. So having a reliable way to open shots, assign tasks to people, review and leave notes is essential for us. Number two, we like to standardize our workflow, meaning that every person in the team should be in sync with each other on how we like to organize and structure our scenes. And last but not least, might be a little obvious, but just having good file management, having a nice naming convention and folder structure. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've tackled each of these three things at the studio and how we've been able to build tools on top of these fundamentals. So Tom, take it away.
So task tracking is more than just a shot list or a to-do list. It's a project roadmap. It's a way to visualize the scope of your project, and it's a central hub to really see how far behind you are on your schedule. This is an example from 7 years ago. It's horrifying and impressive a little bit. It's the buffest Google sheet we've ever made, but it was tons of manual work. It did still serve its purpose, though. For a team of 3 people at the time, we could keep track of our shots, our tasks, shot numbers, and you still got a dopamine hit when you marked a task finished. Now we use Shotgun, ShotGrid, or Flow, depending on what they decide to call it, but you can also use Kitsu, F-Track. There's a lot of other options out there. Regardless, the biggest benefit has been a tool that lets you build automation on the back end. So we have things now like automatic play blasting going straight to Shotgun, task updating, checking out files so we're not like opening the same thing. And these were all things that we built after identifying stuff we were doing manually at a high frequency, and we're like, let's try not to do that anymore.
That brings us to the second part, which is standardizing our workflow. A little backstory, when we first started using Houdini, we really had no clue what we were doing. I mean, Tom mentioned it, but we had 1 month to basically learn a completely new software to use in actual commercials for production, which is a little scary. So it quickly became apparent that at the time of sharing shots or setups with each other, it was super hard to navigate stuff that was not your own. Picture this. Client has a very specific node on this particular setup. It might look simple, but it's actually a lot of complex moving parts. So what do I do as a CG supervisor? Of course, I just assign the node for Steven, right? He's the one working on the shot. But surprise, Steven's on vacation. So what's left to do? I guess I have to open his shot. And when I do that, it looks like this.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not the worst thing that I've ever seen, but you could imagine that if I'm trying to find something very specific in the setup, it's going to take me at least 15 to 20 minutes just to like familiarize myself on what the hell is going on, right? So I just came to the conclusion that because of the scale of our team, it just makes more sense to standardize the way we work. Meaning that by building templates and just being in sync with each other, how we like to color code, annotate, and structure scene graphs, we just ensure that every member of the team is able to open anybody else's shot because we basically now speak the same language. And the last step is file management, which again might be a little obvious, but you know, when artists are just exporting things by hand, things get a little messy. Let's be honest, when people are rushing to get things done, the last thing on their mind is how they name their files or where they put it, right? This is where having a nice and consistent naming convention and folder structure comes into play. At Frame48, this is how we break down our projects. We have our assets folder that takes care of all our assets and all the different types of characters, props, assemblies, environments. Then we have our sequences folders that host our shots. And then each shot is broken down into individual folders for each department. And the key thing here is that both are on the asset side and on the shot side. These department folders are identical with the folder structure within it, which is really important because once you define this, then you can build tools on top of it. At the studio, we have a couple HDAs that take care of shot exporting, asset exporting, and also geometry exporting. In this instance, we have our Frame48 Geo Exporter, which takes care of exporting files in a variety of formats. And it automatically names the files and puts them in the right place. So artists don't have to ever worry about doing this by hand. Hello. In addition to this, it's also tied to our shotgun system. So we can publish files from there. And we also included some functionality to notify teammates when you export something for them. We have Publish Peter, which is a Slack bot. So if I want to send something to Kyle, I can just choose his name from the drop-down menu, and then Publish Peter will send him a Slack message telling him that I just exported something for him, and it'll also attach a file path, which is pretty handy.
We love Publish Peter. He works all the time.
Yeah, he works really hard.
And now we took care of the export side of things. Let's talk about how we access these data. So whether you're in SOPs or in LOPs, you have F48 assets, which loads in any HDAs, FBX, LMBX, so any file types. In addition, it can also load in any animations and effects cache from the same shots from other departments based on your current shot context. So in addition, we also have a asset database with robust assets. Artists can just drag and drop any production ready assets into their scene and start blocking out. We're still constantly growing the database, but right now we have more than 100 assets, each with different models and texture variants.
So these three things might seem overly obvious or simple, depending on where you are in your Houdini journey. But the big thing that made a difference for us is when we started thinking about these three things really as their own projects, as things that could be iterated on and discussed about, and tools could be built around them to find ways to become faster and more efficient. And we found ourselves able to do stuff in 4 weeks, what used to take us 2 months to do. So this project is a great example of these basic ideas taken further. This is a spoiler before we moved our character pipeline to Apex. So there was a lot of exporting of animation back and forth from Houdini. So because of that, we were manually exporting a lot of things. So we were tasked with kind of building an HDA that packaged all of that up, did the groom, did everything in one place, and removed that work with automation. So while things were getting faster, there were also unique projects that were just more complex for their own reasons. So this is a project where we had to build the perfect slushy, that place between water and ice that everyone loves. And so while there was a lot of R&D that artists could be doing in tandem, the end deliverable was still just a single shot. And so we had a bit of a bottleneck with one artist that could kind of be in that shot at any given time. So we needed a way to work on a more granular level than this. So this problem was twofold. There were more complex projects like the example I just gave, as well as just more concurrent projects. We had more people and more projects, higher volume in general. So we needed to split this work into smaller pieces that could be assigned to multiple artists at the same time, or even assets that could be shared across projects to make things a little bit easier.
And in addition to this, at that moment, we were using a pull workflow, meaning that anytime there was a new export or a new asset, artists had to manually pull this new update and put it under scene, which tends to get a little messy. When people are rushing, they forget to do things. Even though we built tools around this to make this a little easier, and we even tried a department HDA workflow at some point, things just got messy, and people usually submit stuff to the farm with out-of-date assets. And you might be thinking, all the problems that we have right now have a pretty obvious solution. And if you guys are thinking USD, you're correct. How many of you know what USD is? Can I see some hands? Oh my God.
Well, how many of you use USD?
Perfect. I don't have to get too technical then. At the time, we were also aware of what USD was and all the benefits. However, anytime I sat down to actually try to implement it on our pipeline, the documentation looked like this. And I'm not the smartest person or the most patient person. So every time I saw this, I would just get discouraged immediately. So I actually want to give a huge shout out to Grant Miller. Hello. I want to give a huge shout out to Grant Miller from Ingenuity. He has a couple of HIVE talks where he describes how they use USD at their studio. And for me, it just made sense. So huge shout out. If you don't know how USD works, I highly recommend watching those talks. So what now? We have USD, right? And because of the layer and referencing system, we had to decide how we wanted to split the work within our team. And we're a small team. We're 14 people. We all multitask and wear many hats. But still, what made the most sense for us was to split it in 4 main departments. And we chose these departments in this particular order. At the very bottom, we have our layout department. They take care of any assets as well as any shot and environment specific layout. Following, we have our animation department, which takes care of character, props, and camera animations. We're a motion design studio, so we like to animate our characters and our cameras together in the same scene. Following, we have our effects department, handling any CFX or simulations. And at the very end, we have our lighting department taking care of lighting or any shot-specific shading. These are the 4 main layers that we have, but we actually have an extra couple ones. At the very bottom, we actually have our manifest USD file. And the sole purpose of this layer is to build this nice scene graph folder structure. Because when you have these predefined scopes, it's super easy for other departments to know exactly where they need to put their work. And then after loop dev, we actually have our render USD file, which is the actual file that gets submitted to the render farm. This one has all of the versions for each department layer, as well as any render settings. When you combine all these things, this is what makes up the actual shot USD file.
And now with the USD layer-based system, we're able to switch from a pull to a push workflow. And with all the sub pipelines, artists have to manually check and pull any updates. Same way tends to create a lot of mistakes when people forgot to update their assets before they start working on the shots. So that's why with the USD layer system, we can just load in a master file that's just a wrapper that contains a reference to a version of a department layer.
A lot of files within files. That's how USD works.
And for example, animation team is working on a shot while the layout department is still laying out the environments. So the animation team can just load in a master version of the layout department. And as layout department publish version 2, animation will just automatically get the update and be referenced in version 2. And so the same concept also applies to asset as well. Our asset importer will load in a master USDA file of different assets, and it's just a reference to 2 different layers of that assets. The first one is the model layer, which contains all the geometry data. And we have a second layer, is the surface layer, which contains all the texture and shading information.
Okay, that was a lot, but now that we know the background of how we structure our USD system, let me show you how we actually work in a shot. We have a nice HDA called Frame48 Shot Importer. This HDA is project, shot, and department aware. Again, we're just using that nice folder structure that we talked about. So when you drop it in your scene and you click load, it'll automatically find those department layers that are relevant to your department for that specific shot. And it just assembles them automatically for you. It by default loads that master department layer, meaning that you're always working with the most recent version. However, if you wanted to load a specific version, you can also do so by just clicking on the drop-down menu and picking that version, which could be really helpful. For example, if you're doing a simulation that might take you like 8 hours and you just want to triple confirm that nothing's going to get updated while you're simming. Additionally, if you wanted to load a department layer that's not relevant to yours, for example, if you're working on effects, you typically only have access to the layout and animation department like information because they come before your department. However, if I'm, doing a pyrosim and I want to see how the density looks with the lighting, I can just navigate to the actual properties panel and load that lighting department layer. And that'll give me access to the actual lights that the lighting department is using. And I can tweak my simulation accordingly to this.
And now with the push workflow, we need a way to prevent the assets or department layers get updated mid-render on the render farm. So that's why we create a F48 lock-C, which just runs Python scripts throughout the stage to find any assets or department layers and select them to the most recent versions that are being used. We know there are asset resolver out there that can do a better job, but we still haven't had the time to implement them yet. But they'll be our next step in our pipeline.
Yeah, we need another month break to just dig into that.
So that brings us to part 3 of our talk, where we're going to walk through kind of the various departments working in real time. A little bit of perspective on the layout and assets department, the animation department, as well as the look, dev, and lighting department. So keep in mind that on any given project, this is happening on 20 to 50 shots at the same time across 3 to 4 projects at the same time as well. So our studio process throughout the life of the company has always been pretty much the same. Like everyone else, we're starting with storyboards and previs, followed by animation, and then look dev at the end. What changed the most with USD is that it really enabled us to collaborate across all these steps on day one. So for example, we have a storyboard artist on our team starting right away and someone building a very early asset. That can get pushed out to everyone, and within a few hours, you're blocking a scene, you're doing animation. And the biggest win there has been that everyone is contextually confident that what they're working in is relevant to everyone else. So gone are the days where you're like grinding on a scene and you reload the asset and now the scene's actually outside or something, and you just didn't know. So that's all kind of getting pulled in real time.
So first, we'll start by creating an assets. We do this starting by dropping our asset templates, which creates a predefined scene graph structures. So all of our assets are structured the same way. And if different artists are going to your different assets, trying to tweak any texture or the model, they know exactly where to find it. And with the USD layer system, we're able to just update any model or texture, and all the animation will be preserved. And for these examples, we're doing laptop commercials, so we need laptop assets.
So yeah, we start by just pushing a very basic Apex rig so that the animation department can just start working right away. And some projects, that main asset, in this case like a CAD model from the client, just keeps changing multiple times. And the biggest win is by using Apex, we're able to just start animating with whatever, and then just replace that model as it gets updated and preserve that animation, which is huge. We also start our environment, and we basically like to work by just building the basic architecture of, in this case, musician studio room. And we like to work this way because we want to get a version out of just kind of like the basic room architecture plus any hero set pieces, in this instance, that desk that goes in the middle of the room, so that when you publish it, every other department can basically start working. And in the meantime, after you publish that, then someone else can start working on the actual set dressing of the scene. And it's as easy as just dropping a bunch of frame 48 assets, using our USD database, duplicating, instancing, setting some variants, and basically it just feels like you're playing a video game, just placing assets. It's pretty satisfying, to be honest. This is the actual final node graph of that specific environment. On the top right, we have that basic room architecture, which is actually just a model layer in that USD file. And on the left side, we have all the components that make up the set dressing for that final room. When we're happy with this actually just gets merged on top of the model layer as its own layer. In this case, we call it a surface layer, a little generic. But when you merge these two things, you end up with your actual final environment USD file. Once this is published, then every department has access to this. In this instance, the layout department can just drop it in their scene and do any shot-specific tweaks like moving props around or even setting an initial camera blocking. And when they push and export this shot department layer, then every other department has access to this information as well.
And now, after the layout is published, we're ready to start animate any props or characters. Animating with Apex and USD means that we can always update our characters rig. We'll still always maintain the animations. And the same with textures. With the USD layer system, all the texture will just be carried over as well. And as layout animation effects are still working on their shots, the look dev team can start lighting the scenes and just update any lighting as needed when their different department layers get updated. And another benefits of USD is that we can create a environment specific lighting that's being exported out with the assets. For example, we have a room and we can just have a room lighting that's being exported out with the room itself. So which means that all the different shots they are referencing this room will have the same universal lightings, and it can just be adjusted on a per shot basis. And the same as well, we can just adjust the lighting on the assets, and all the shots that's referencing this room will have the same lighting get adjusted at the same time.
An actual example of this is, for example, if client decides that the spot should not be daytime anymore and it should just be nighttime, and you have 50 shots and you want to just push this change across all the shots, if the lighting is universal and it's part of the asset, you can just do it on the asset and everything will just get updated, which is pretty nice.
That's definitely never happened.
Yeah.
And now we're ready to render. We can just lock our scenes and start setting out our different render layers. For this project, which is laptops, we usually have two different render layers. One is for the product, just a laptop, and one's for the background. And we can start setting up different maps by using prunes or render geometry settings. And after that, we have our collect render layers HDA, which will collect each different render layers and save them out as a USDA per different layers and submit them to the farm as a batch. And the benefits of saving our render layers as USDA is that it's an ASCII file, which means it's human readable. We can just very easily adjust any render parameters with Python scripts without opening Houdini, adjust parameters, and submit to farm again.
Yeah, I've been guilty of submitting stuff to the farm with the wrong settings and then just being lazy and modifying the text file by hand.
That's the one tool I built out of 61 slides.
This is a little time lapse showing some of the versions that particular environment went through. I think in total we had around 50 plus versions, a lot of client feedback and notes, which we love. But the key takeaway here is that ever since we got that version 1 published, every single department that was reading this version was able to start working. And then all the subsequent updates just got pushed automatically. So anytime anyone would refresh their scene, things would change around and shift, which I think saved us a lot of time. This goes as well for the laptop itself. I think it went through like 20 versions. And even though we talked about this in a very linear way, just remember that a lot of these steps were happening concurrently. And I think that's the beauty of USD. You can have as many people as you want working on a single shot, all the way from having a single artist working on a specific prop that's part of the environment, all the way to changing the entire room structure, the lighting, the shading, you name it. And all of this is non-destructive because of that referencing and layer system, meaning that every time you tweak something, you're just applying your own opinion or override over the previous layer, and you can always just revert that to its original state.
And this is how the final project turned out. There is audio.
So guys, I'm about to do it. I'm about to do it. Yeah, talk. The king like climbing now, and I'm sitting on the throne, but he's riding now. They don't gotta do it big, they don't gotta do it big. And you know we gotta do it big, you know we gotta do it big. Before I come, I'm gonna do it big. I'll just well, it's the flower, it's the way top, and it's on just like to me, rap, tonight. Just the pink rock, big rock, and this black big top, like it's top, do it big.
Lenovo. If you want 2 screens, you can buy the Lenovo book today at Best Buy. So in addition to the hero videos like you just saw, for all of our projects, we usually do additional assets like key art, stills for print or for billboards. So because every shot is a self-contained USD file, we can now take these shots and kind of use them as building blocks to load them into a single HIVE file, make changes, and then print them all out. So for example, at the top, you'll see the relevant shots from the commercial we just saw, and at the bottom, the stills that they turned into. So we were able to just import those shots, make adjustments to the lighting, maybe reblock some props, do a new camera, and have all that work be saved without needing to split it into a separate HIVE file and bake all that information in. So for example, now projects like this would be much easier, where we could have one shoe and one camera with different variants for the shoe and bring in environments from the spot and just swap them out. So this was traditionally possible as well in our older work, but the problem was that you would have to do it at like the very end of the project and save all those files out as new ones. So if there was changes, you were kind of screwed. Now you can do that much earlier, set up those still images and then kind of let them sit and then render them at the very end. If you want to go real crazy, you could do 130 stills all in one HIVE file. This is for an e-commerce project. And there is something magical about like adjusting the lighting and then rendering everything with one button click.
So what did we learn today? USD is pretty cool. It is definitely a little bit intimidating when you first start using it because you do have to change the way you think about things and how to work. But I do think it exponentially increases team collaboration. I do not see us ever going back to not using USD. However, I don't think it's a must. I think that as long as you're tracking your work is neatly organized, and you have a nice naming convention, folder structure, no matter if you're working your thesis film or the next big Apple commercial, you're already on the right path to create amazing work. All these other fancy tools that we showed you are just built on top of these principles, and they just allow us to work a little bit faster. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm a pipeline enthusiast, so I've got a couple of USD questions, if that's okay. So my first one, which is pretty specific, is like SIM caches. Like, do you just go straight to USD, or do you like do like a value clip thing with BGO files, or?
It depends what we're working on. We do have a Fring48FX cache node. So it has a couple options. You can go straight to USD, or if it's a very long simulation, you can do clip sequences. If it's Spyro, of course, we just export to VDB and just reference it back in. So there's a lot of ways. It's definitely depending on what you're trying to do.
Okay, but like you try to support like all the different.
Yeah. Like there's benefit to all of them, but yeah, there's just depending what you're doing, basically.
Yeah, motion clip is good if you have like a mega scene because you'll just run out of memory.
Yeah, if you're caching like a simple asset, the only thing if you do a motion clip, that asset reference, I think it's lost. So it would not update if there's updates from other departments, which is one of the downsides.
Yeah, I see. So have there been any like pain points with working with USD?
Pain points?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just you do have to change your mindset on how you structure your work. And there's a little nuance on like what order you do things in. There's some stuff that you should just not do because it's just like time sample authoring. Like I could talk like for an entire day about like all these things. There's definitely some downsides, but I do think the upsides are way more than the downsides.
And getting people to use the scene graph tree too. It's like we move everyone to Houdini and we're like, layers are gone.
Like go
now
back
we're
to
now,
outline.
and now it's like, wait, we have kind of outlier again. So
You need to put everything in the right path.
Yeah. We built tools to like make it easier for people to just select from a drop down where things go, and they still don't do it.
And then my last one is also specific. When you guys write out USD files, do you guys write that out locally or on the FAR? And especially like the files that you send to render, like do you write out the USD file on the farm like as like a 2-part job, or?
You mean the actual like USD that gets submitted to the FAR?
Yeah.
Usually the scenes are pretty quick to render because everything again it's a reference to something else. So as you go down the line, like the lighting department, which is the last step, is just reading cache data already. So like actually writing that USD file takes like 5 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
yeah, thank you.
I have a quick question. Do you have a dedicated pipeline person that's what I thought.
These two guys,
Yeah. So, okay, just make sure.
when they're not working on 5 projects at once, that was
I know you wear many hats, so.
A lot of hats.
Hey, this is really awesome. So thanks for coming. My question was in regards to, let's say, like how you guys determine, like, let's say if a client was like, you know what, we just don't like this shot completely. We wanted to change the angle, and it's really going to affect pretty much like the way simulations are rendered, how lighting is affected. How do you guys determine, like, in terms of like sort of like, where does the change, like which department is starting, which department is like getting ready to like hand off the project? How do you guys determine that? And is USD, did you find USD was effective in helping you guys with those changes also?
like how do we determine kind of how far back to go and who to
How
assign?
back to go, who's going to start, who's like, who's next, like who's going to be who's the project's going to be handed off to next? Or where can you guys work in conjunction?
Yes. I mean, usually as the project marches along, we have specific people that are focused on animation, specific people that are focused on lighting. If a note comes back to make a big change, it's going to go back to the person who was originally working on that part of the shot earlier on. But usually we structure our timelines and projects in a way where we're showing our clients previs, we're showing them style frames, and as we go along, we're trying really carefully to avoid situations where there's like major changes at the end. There always are some, and so part of that is just, you go back to the team and you're like, we've got this great new idea. we're gonna change this thing. It's gonna be great.
And everyone's super stoked.
Yeah, everyone's always excited.
You guys have like, a couple, your timeline's now compressed to do this, do these massive changes.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
it's always there can be timeline constraints for sure, but
Question.
Hello. So with the USDs, do you keep it packed, or do you use like LODs so it doesn't bog the scene down?
Sorry, could you?
LEDs, or do we pack stuff? How to not make it super slow?
Our asset template actually has like a proxy output. So whenever we're authoring assets, there's always a proxy version. Usually the scale of the scenes that we work on is not that big, so we don't use LEDs usually. We just use the final render geo, and that's typically fine.
Okay, but yeah, so you just use the proxy version then instead of the render version?
For viewport performance, if we're instancing stuff, we definitely have proxy versions of that, so we don't have to like slow down the entire scene. But yeah, typically for all like a small set like the one that we just saw, we don't typically need that because it's so small that it doesn't really affect performance.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So this is a somewhat specific question, but when you guys went through your like scene graph tree or the screenshot where you have the different scopes, like the cameras, effects, layout, lights, etc., and when you were talking about having light rigs for like certain props, for example, like a lamp has a light that's attached to that asset. One thing I've ran into, and I'm just wondering how you guys deal with it, or if I'm just doing it in the wrong way, is if that, for example, light asset had like the layout prop lamp, but then also lights and then the lamp light, when you're referencing that into a larger scene, being able to like those scopes not like overriding each other or something. I don't know if that really makes sense, but on the reference lop before, it only lets me like pull in a specific crim versus if this asset has a layout and lights like prim. That's something I've ran into before.
Yeah, so we like to structure like our assets in a very granular level. So each asset is actually like completely self-packaged. So like if the asset has lights, there's a lights scope inside the asset as well as materials and everything. Because we really don't want to have a massive material scope at the very base of the shot because it would just be like thousands of materials, right? So every single asset is like self-packaged so that when you bring it into like a scene, then there's not a chance for you to like override something else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so for materials, if you guys do all the materials per asset, like is there ever a case, like do you have base materials that you'll like reference in and then do overrides on per asset? Or like, are you just cool with having some duplicate materials if the shot has stuff like do you really care about optimizing that stuff, or is it not worth it?
It depends what we're working on. That e-commerce project that Tom was talking about, the 131 stills, did have like, I think like 60 assets in total. In that particular scenario, we did talk about maybe doing like an asset for the material that is referenced in all the other like assets, so that if you want to do global tweaks, like they all share the same like metal, for example, we can just tweak that one metal and then push it through everything. For other stuff, we're not super like strict about it. We usually do like just duplicate materials and just reuse them basically.
Yeah, because we found that usually you're going to end up making materials slightly different no matter what anyway. So Will, who does most of our assets on our team, he has his own presets that he's always using as a starting point, but I think he tends to keep them pretty unique.
Yeah, so using a lot of like standardizing the workflow, we have a bunch of recipes for like metals, like laptop specific materials that we can just reuse and like tweak, and it just saves a lot of time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any last question? How long did it take you to refine your pipeline?
How long?
Oh, the presentation?
No, like
The actual pipeline?
yeah, like are you constantly refining it?
Yeah, to be honest, in the last year, we've gone through 3 versions of this. So we're just like changing it all the time. Yeah, but the USD pipeline, we've been using it for what, like around a year, maybe a little less than a year.
Well, less than that, yeah. It's been a newer, like ever since Kyle's worked here, we've had 3 entirely different workflows.
Yeah, he experienced like
Experience all different.
he was here on our HDA SOP workflow, and now he's here on the USD workflow. But it's just constantly like changing and updating. And because we are constantly working on projects, it's a little scary to try to push something out. So whenever we have like a period of time where we're free, we're just okay, let's just go all in and try to.
We also test stuff in production sometimes, which you shouldn't do.
Yeah, I think last week I broke something, and then someone slacked me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fix it right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely did that a lot of times.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you guys so much.